The Hawkeyes pick up another commitment, this time along the defensive line. Joseph Anderson is the latest to make his commitment for the class of 2024. This Iowa defensive line is going to be good. Just how good? Maybe the best ever. Today, Locked On Hawkeyes.
You are Locked On Hawkeyes, your daily podcast on the Iowa Hawkeyes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in. I'm Trent Condon, and this is the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. Thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. We're available wherever you get podcasts. You can also find us on YouTube. While you're there, hit that subscribe button. It helps us get in front of more Hawkeye fans. We'll hope everybody out there was able to have a great 4th of July. Maybe you got a couple extra days off on Monday and Tuesday, as I did, but we're still churning out the content here for you on Locked On, and a time that is, yes, the lull of the off season. We're into July now. That means that we have Big Ten football media days right around the corner, followed by Iowa football media days, and we are inching ever closer to Iowa football. Well, in the interim, it's been a lot of conversation about the future of Iowa football, and we will continue that here today. And the latest Iowa Hawkeye, as Iowa gets a commitment from Joseph Anderson. Big kid, 6'5", a future defensive lineman, 210 pounds. Obviously, got to add some weight to that frame to play at the Big Ten level, but a very intriguing prospect. And this is where I was gone with a couple of their commitments recently along the defensive line. And the depth of this defensive line and what they've been able to do. So if we remember back, and we're going to talk a little bit more about some of the best defensive lines in Iowa football and why this Iowa football team in 2023 has an opportunity to maybe have the best defensive line that we've ever seen. But the depth that they built, and this is yet another one of those guys, just molding the players in the perfect way that Iowa wants it to be done. We talked about this when Devin Kennedy made his commitment to the Hawkeyes, and we see it here with Joseph Anderson. Joseph Anderson didn't play for a great high school team, but when he went to camps, he was a guy that a lot of people wanted. And it just always feels great, right? When I was able to go out there and beat some of their Midwest brethren for some of these commitments. And go down to St. Louis, a place that's been incredibly fruitful for Iowa throughout the years. Adrian Claiborne among them, Marvin McNutt, and a few others throughout the time. St. Louis is a place that Iowa needs to continue to dabble in. It's in proximity, a very close place. When you look at some Big Ten programs really outside of Illinois, it is the closest destination. And for the people that don't want to stay home, that don't want to go to Missouri or make the trip down to the SEC and play at a place like Arkansas, Iowa is a semi-regional spot that makes a whole lot of sense, and a place that Iowa's done a good job of tapping into. And I would love to see this continue even more going forward. But when you look at Anderson, what you see, first of all, is the wingspan, the size that he has, and just the molding ability that he's going to have. Plus, he's a track athlete. And that's another thing that he wants to do at the University of Iowa, is he wants to be a guy that plays a couple of sports. We've talked about in the past how difficult a nature that is of going out there and competing at the Big Ten level, at the high NCAA level in two sports. And it doesn't matter what the two sports are. In the past, yes, there's been some guys that have done both the track and the football side of things. We had Timmy D, of course, that was able to do that. What, Bashir Yamini? What was that guy's name? Yeah, you remember who I'm talking about, back in the turn of the century. There's been those guys in the past, but it's going to be difficult. He's a guy, though, that comes in, triple jump, long jump. Hey, that says athleticism, and that's why it gets exciting. It's also exciting, as I mentioned, about the people that they beat. You beat the home state team in Missouri. You beat Iowa State, Kansas, Nebraska involved. And that is something that is incredibly important for Iowa football. We know where Iowa football is going to be pretty much every year as it pertains to recruiting. They're going to be somewhere between usually 25 and 40, somewhere in that realm. That's just kind of the spot over the last 25 years that Iowa is. Yeah, there's been some blips, there's been highs, there's been lows, but for the most part, that is where Iowa's going to be, in that 25 to 40 range. And I see after this commitment, Iowa jumped up to 29 in the country. All right, we'll see where it ends up, but it's going to be somewhere there. What I like to do, though, is look at these recruits and see, who did you beat? And a lot of them, it was beating Nebraska. It was beating the in-state team in Iowa State. It was beating Minnesota, Kansas State. Kansas State's a program I have so much respect for of what Chris Kleiman has built back up with that program, taking over for Snyder. And of course, we remember him as the offensive coordinator back in the 80s under Hayden Fry. That is a program, though, that I believe is incredibly smart. And if Kirk hangs it up here pretty quickly in the next couple of years, definitely Chris Kleiman has to be high on the list of candidates for Iowa football. You'll have the in-house candidate, LeVar Woods, a guy that I've been also a big proponent for, but definitely on the short list. I believe Chris Kleiman needs to be a part of that. And I just respect what they've done as a program, talking to people in the recruiting space, the way that that program also recruits. They do it right. And no surprise, it's an Iowan doing it right. And Kleiman, who grew up in Waterloo. But that aside, I want to take this moment to jump in a little bit and just look through some of the recruits that Iowa's got for the class of 2024, starting with Joseph Anderson. We mentioned the offer list that he has, beating Nebraska and Kansas State, Mizzou, Iowa State for his services. The top rated recruit in this class doesn't have a whole lot of offers, at least listed offers, because he committed so dang early. I mean, he's an offensive lineman from East Buchanan. He is a guy, though, that I've been told in the recruiting space, if he hadn't made his commitment so early, if he would have went through the camps, if he would have went through the recruiting process, this would have been a kid not only that had offers from the regional teams that we talk about, the Nebraskas, the Minnesotas, the Kansas States of the world, but he also would have had offers from the who's who of the upper Midwest, Michigan, Notre Dame, maybe even Ohio State would have come calling. That's what the belief is, that Cody Fox can be at the next level. Didn't have those listed offers. These are the listed offers, though, of some of the other guys. Let's start with the local kid, Derek Weiskopf. Williamsburg kid, heck of an athlete. Wisconsin, Minnesota, Nebraska, Iowa State. You beat those kids, those schools for a kid, you feel like you're in really, really good shape. Will Nolan on the offensive line. Minnesota, Duke, Iowa State, Illinois. Pretty good offer list there. Bodie McCaslin, another Illinois kid and an offensive lineman. A really nice recruiting list. Nebraska, Kansas State, Minnesota, Vanderbilt, Missouri, Purdue, Penn State also there for McCaslin. Even the quarterback of this class, who we've heard different things about James Rezar, but Indiana, Wake Forest, North Carolina came calling, and yet he stayed with his commitment to the Hawkeyes. Even Drew Campbell, he knew he was going to be a Hawkeye, and maybe if he didn't have the older brother that wore the black and gold, maybe more offers would have came his way, but still Iowa State and Kansas State were involved with Drew Campbell. Brevin Dahl, running back from ADM Adel, Kansas State, Iowa State, Minnesota, Oklahoma State, Purdue. You see that Oklahoma State offer. Oklahoma State is not a team and a program that recruits our state very often. Yet Brevin Dahl had an offer from them. Reese Vanderzee, we knew Nebraska tried to get involved. Iowa State and Iowa were the finalists for him. Always feel good when we beat the Huskers for a recruit. Gavin Hoffman, Missouri, the local school for him. Arizona State, Tennessee, and Arkansas were also there. Nebraska, Illinois, Purdue for the tight end commitment for the class of 2024. Preston Reese, even a kid that's, kind of in this group in this recruiting class that has really almost been forgotten about. He had a Nebraska offer. He had an Iowa State offer, and he's going to be a Hawkeye. And finally, the lowest recruited guy, at least in terms of the recruiting services and how he ranks, is the aforementioned Devin Kennedy, kid from down in Arizona. An Oregon State offer, Penn State, Illinois, and that is a guy that you have to be excited about. Don't just look at the numbers. Don't just look at where I was going to be in the recruiting class and the recruiting rankings, because that doesn't tell you the whole story. Telling the whole story is what Iowa went out there and what they did, and that is going out there and finding some high-level guys that fit what they want to do, and they also beat some pretty good teams for it, and teams that you're going to be butting heads with a whole lot on the recruiting trail. Iowa knows what they are. There is no fluff. This is what we are. This is what our program is. And if you want to be a part of it, we have an opportunity for you. The sales job that they continue to do, how they have built what they've been, during the early 2010s, the 2011, 2012 classes. You look back a decade ago, they have built this thing right back up, and it's turnkey operation. Well, a defensive line commit in Joseph Anderson, he is a part of the future of the defensive line. What about this year's defensive line? I believe it has a chance to be one of the Hawkeyes' best ever, certainly of the Ferentz era. We'll talk about that as we continue here. How good is this defensive line, and can it be the best ever? That's as we continue Locked On Hawkeyes. Today's episode of the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast is brought to you by FanDuel. Take your first swing at betting Major League Baseball on FanDuel and get 10 times your first bet amount in bonus bets up to $200. That's right. When you bet 20 bucks, you'll land $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. That's 200 to spend betting on everything from the money line, over under baseball. You lay the 1.5 on the run line. You can do that. You can even bet who's going to hit a home run in the game, who's going to hit the first home run in a game. And you do it all on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Plus, when you win, you get paid instantly. No better place to bet on MLB than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Sign up today. Visit fanduel.com/lockedon to get up to $200 in bonus bets. Again, fanduel.com/lockedon is where you need to go. FanDuel, official partner of Major League Baseball. Trent Condon back with you once again here on the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. Thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. Hit that subscribe button while you're here on YouTube. If you're on the podcast side, 5-star reviews. That's what we're looking for as we talk Hawkeyes with you each and every day. Your team every day. That's what we do here on the Locked On Network, and not just what we do here on the Hawkeye side of things. Doesn't matter your NFL team, NBA, Major League Baseball, NHL. We have you covered with your team every day across the Locked On Network. So the question is right now for Iowa, just how good is this defensive line going to be? We talked about the depth, and I think that's a place you definitely have to start with this team and what they are. Looking back, the great defensive lines that I think about, certainly the Ferentz era, two jump to mind. 2004, a team that won the last Big Ten championship for the Hawkeyes 19 years ago. Just kind of scary to think about. But that aside, it was built up front. The running game went awry. The offense, though Drew Tate was a wizard at times out there and leading this team to a Big Ten championship, there were still plenty of times where you knew the running game wasn't going to get going. There's nothing they could do. The angry Iowa running back Hayden God came out, and he absolutely obliterated what they were trying to do. They still tried to run it. Didn't matter if it was Sam Brownlee back there or Big Chuck's Aaron Mickens. It didn't matter. What they did is they tried to run it, but it was a whole lot of Drew Tate. Defensively, though, that's where that team was. And we love to talk about the linebackers, of course, on that squad with Abdul Hodge in the middle and Chad Greenway running around making plays out there. But really, more than anything, it was the defensive line. You had Matt Roth coming off the edge. And, he burst onto the scene in 2002, had double-digit sacks that season in a limited role. Jonathan Babineau, maybe one of the most underappreciated Hawkeyes, certainly of the Ferentz era, a guy that went on, played in the league for over a decade, made a ton of money, and he made some big plays. A guy that came in as a fullback and turned himself into one heck of a defensive lineman, and also the versatility that he had playing inside and outside. He had Tyler Lubke out there. He had some youngsters on the team, and Kenny Webema, King and Kroll, both those guys as freshmen weren't even defensive linemen yet. Started their careers at linebacker, and then Big D-Rob, Derek Robinson on that 2004 defensive line. Very good. The question was depth. 2009, another one of the gold standards for Iowa football up front. Adrian Claiborne, an All-American. He was immaculate that year. Not just what he did getting the quarterback that season, double-digit sacks, but also what he was able to do with the big punt block against Penn State as Iowa went into the whiteout and won a football game there. Broderick Binns, another guy, just those long arms, and Binns was able to just make plays every single time. If he got a hand on somebody, he was going to bring him down. Christian Ballard, another guy with the versatility, playing inside, playing outside. He was a guy that had a really, really command of what he was trying to do. Mike Daniels, eating up space in the middle. Carl Klug. That was the 2009 team, but it was really only 5 deep. This year is different. When you look at this 2023 Iowa defensive line and what they are going to be up front, it's just different. You start with, obviously, the return of a couple of super seniors. You come back this year with Logan Lee. You come back this year and you have Noah Shannon in the middle. You got those guys helping out. All right, that's great, right? And then you got Evans out there and making plays. So you got 3 guys that have played a ton of football. You don't have to put a ton of reps on them at this point in the spring into the August camp. You know what you have with these guys. You know they're going to be doing the work, and you know you're in good shape. These are, at minimum, very good rotational guys at the Big Ten level. And then you get to that next tier. from Deontay Craig, who it still feels, if there's going to be a guy that becomes an All American, that becomes Adrian Claiborne, Matt Roth, the guy that's going to get to the quarterback a ton, it's definitely Deontay Craig. I mean, he has that kind of ability. You continue on the defensive end. Max Llewellyn, I continue to hear that he has put in the work and he is going to be a guy that's going to be high impact. I mean, what we saw from Aaron Graves last year is a true freshman. He's bigger, he's stronger, he's out there. We saw Pittman at times last season, but that's not all. They still got other guys. A guy like Herkett, who really I thought a couple of years ago before his injury, he was a guy that you could put in there and you were not going to see a huge drop off at defensive line. They go out and they get Thompson out of Iowa Western, and he looks to be a guy that's going to be a big time playmaker. Even some of the walk on guys are guys that I think you have to be excited about the potential that they have. And that's what you have with this team. You bring in the youngsters, and are we going to see an Allen or a Crawford, one of those guys as a redshirt freshman? Are we going to see them be somebody you can put out there and make some plays? Jackson Filer coming in, another one from Iowa Western. Is he going to be a guy that can make some impacts? It is the depth of this defensive line that separates it from some of the great ones. You still need those stars. You still need the guy that you have to game plan for. And if we see that this year from Deontay Craig, absolutely, this will be the best defensive line in the Ferentz era at minimum. That's what we have in front of us. So as we wrap things up here, well, 4th of July is now in the rearview mirror. We are on the back half of summer, it feels, and getting ready, yes, to flip the calendar already to August, and we'll get closer and closer to football season. We are still a couple of weeks away from really gearing things up and getting to Big Ten football media days this year back in Indianapolis and everything happening there. But, well, it's 4th of July. Beer. Of course, we got to be thinking about beer. Well, I was able to have a couple of swarms during the 4th of July. Hope you were as well. We're going to talk about the impact to swarm beer and what it's going to mean for NIL, for the Hawkeye Collective and the Swarm Collective. We'll do that when we come back here on Locked On Hawkeyes. Trent kind of back with you one final time on the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. So 4th of July, great time. Got to see the fireworks. Kids had fun. Got the sparklers going, doing that. Shot off a couple in the backyard. Yeah, we're having a great time, hanging out with friends. And one thing that I've noticed this weekend, also went back home this weekend, hung out at my parents' place, and got to see my sister and my new little nephew. And it was a great time. But one thing I had to do is I had to bring them Swarm beer, right? So they're up in Northeast Iowa. And they have toppling Goliath up there. And they got good beer up there. But they don't have beer that gives back to Hawkeye student athletes. And that's what the new Swarm Golden Ale does. So brought them back, handed them out, gave one to my stepdad. He enjoyed it, thought it was good. Gave a couple of tastes to a couple other family members and had uncles and cousins around and those kind of things. And got thumbs up from everybody. But the best part about it was my brother-in-law. Married to my sister. He's an Ohio State grad. He is a big Buckeye fan. So I had to do it, right? I had to give him a Swarm beer. Give him a taste. He's a beer connoisseur. He liked it. All right. Pretty good. And then I explained to him exactly what this was, what Swarm Golden Ale was, and that he was helping give back to student athletes. Now, yes, the money actually came out of my pocket, but let's see. Next time he's in the state of Iowa, let's hope he picks up a 4-pack. Help out those Hawks, right? A little bit. We talked a couple weeks ago with the first launch at Exile Brewing here in Des Moines. And we talked a little bit at the time with RJ Tersey, the owner. And you can go back in the archives and you can find that interview and talked a lot about what this is. But one thing that continues to stick with me, their most popular, most well-known beer certainly is Ruthie. And when the numbers came out, and if Swarm beer sells at the same level as Ruthie, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars a year that goes into the Hawkeye Collective, into the Hawkeye Swarm. Hundreds of thousands. I mean, this is an easy thing, right? If you're going to drink beer, you're going to do it. Well, do it. Something that tastes good, something that gives back, and gives to these student athletes. It's a win-win for everybody. Not only that, we also found last week that Iowa is going to have it at Kinnick Stadium. And you're making your way up there. What are you going to do? You got a couple opportunities. Maybe you got a taste of it. Maybe you liked it. And you said, Well, here's the choice. You're going to have domestic light, you're going to have something else out there, or going to have a swarm beer. Kinnick Stadium, be ready. I think you're going to see a lot of Hawkeye fans. And just watching this weekend and watching Twitter from time to time and hopping on there, Brad Heinrichs, who runs the Swarm Collective, who came together with this idea, he tweeted out a couple of different times, and I saw it all over the place. You can follow us on our Twitter account at Trent Condon for me or Locked On Iowa. And just seeing the amount of people trying it for the first time, went into a couple of different Hy-Vees, both here locally and just outside the area. And what do you see in the displays when you make your way over to the booze place in Hy-Vee? Oh, yeah, there it is. There's big displays. There was one, I was on the south side earlier last week. I think it was Friday last week. There was a big display there. No, the Urbandale Hy-Vee had it here where I live in West Des Moines. They had it out. It's everywhere. And your opportunity is coming. If it's not in your area yet, it sounds like it's getting there. And we go from the statewide launch to that next tier. It's going to be great. Hey, let's drink some beer. Let's help out the Hawkeyes. Sounds like a win-win. That'll do it for today. We got more coming up your way this week on Locked On Hawkeyes. Hoping to run down LaShawn Daniels and reconnect with him as we get ready for football season. Plenty to talk about with Iowa football. The best defensive line ever. Oh, yes. Feeling good about that. My optimism meter is through the roof. Do I need to pull down just a little bit? Do I need to pull back? This is a weird spot for me. I'm normally not optimistic about the teams that I root for. I'm so optimistic about this Iowa team. I'm getting excited for it. We are making our way through. It is July. Next is August. That means football is in the air. You can feel it some mornings. You get up early. You got that dew coming off the grass, and boy, football, it is right around the corner. Don't want to wish away my summer, no doubt, but hey, there are plenty of great things happening here in the world of Hawkeyes, and we got you covered on the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. Thanks again for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. We'll talk to you again tomorrow. Go Hawks.